very much. My topic today is Gandhi and the media. Certainly I'm not the first person to examine the relationship between Gandhi and reporters, or for that matter the important role the media played in the struggle for Indian independence and the sense of democracy and polity that flourished in the early days after Indian liberation. From the earliest days of the Congress Party in India, professional journalists were involved in the movement. Of the 72 representatives at the first Congress meeting in Bombay in 1885, over a dozen were professional journalists. Many of the leading figures of the Indian independence movement owned and operated their own newspapers, including Gandhi. While the presence of reporters in the life of the Congress Party is significant, there's also general agreement among scholars that it was Gandhi who taught the Congress Party how to use the media as a tool in their campaigns. The influence of Gandhi on what might be called the media campaigns produced by the Congress Party and by Gandhi himself has led scholars like Paul Greenough to explore the nature of Gandhi's conscious cultivation of public opinion, as well as a sense Gandhi had that dissemination of opinion and exchange of ideas delivered in part through the media would play a part in the new polity of India. The press, in short, was to become a necessary part of political life in India, in part due to the efforts of Gandhi. The interpretations of Gandhi's use of the media are varied. Most acknowledge Gandhi's understanding of the power of the media to communicate his message and his effective use of this medium. Others also critique Gandhi as something of a media manipulator who distorted reports of himself and his campaigns through his control over the media in India. There is value, then, in examining Gandhi's perspective on the media as a tool in satyagraha campaigns to gain a clearer sense of his actual practice and the ideal use of this medium. What I want to suggest is that Gandhi had a very broad understanding of media. For Gandhi, the function of the media was as a witness to events and as a disseminator of information, but was not limited to the media in the traditional sense, that being newspapers, radio, and so on. Rather, Gandhi viewed all witnesses of events and injustice to have the same responsibility as the media, to be witnesses to those events and to share those reports of the events. Finally, Gandhi's vision of the media in any sense of the term was not as a neutral body of information transmission. Rather, he saw the media as an instrument of change. Reporting events for Gandhi is an active process of engagement in struggles for justice. I think Gandhi's understanding of the media is best explored through his ideas on satyagraha, and that'll be the approach I'll take for the rest of the talk. Typical of any satyagraha campaign conducted by Gandhi was an initial and intense period of what is sometimes called propaganda, but more simply put, just getting information out. This information took a number of different forms, including parades, demonstrations, posters, and newspapers. At its most basic level, these initial moments of these satyagraha campaigns were about spreading the word and communication between a leader and the group. While the needs for such lines of communication may seem obvious, and to some extent it is, we might call this use of the media as a traditional understanding of press and as a medium of communication. There is, however, a much more complex type of active communication that is at the heart of Gandhi's earliest experiences, which led to his satyagraha campaigns. I would suggest that the nature and place of Gandhi's use of the media in such campaigns finds its roots in the earliest experience of injustice in South Africa. From this, I take this idea from Gandhi's own account in his autobiography, a document which originally appeared as a serialized component in the print media. The two chapters of the autobiography I have in mind are On the Way to Pretoria and More Hardships. These are presented by Gandhi as pivotal moments that led him to his first satyagraha campaigns in South Africa. His account of these events is self-consciously designed, I would suggest, to illustrate to the reader some of the basic principles of what would become satyagraha, and hence some of his ideas on the need for media in such campaigns. As you might recall from the autobiography, Gandhi is in South Africa to examine a legal case, and it was his initial intention to return to India at the conclusion of the case. the nature and duration of his stay in South Africa are dramatically altered due to the events that occurred on a trip from Durban to Johannesburg. Initially, Gandhi is accosted on the train leg of that journey. On reaching Maritzburg, Gandhi reports, quote, "A passenger came next and looked me up and down. He saw that I was a colored man. This disturbed him. Out he went and came in again with one or two officials. They all kept quiet, when another official came to me and said, 'Come along, you must go to the van compartment.' 'But I have a first-class ticket,' said I. 'That doesn't matter,' rejoined the other. 'I tell you, you must go to the van compartment.'" End quote. As we all know, Gandhi resists his removal, and when he is forced out, he refuses to go to the van compartment and spends the night in the cold train station's waiting room. This long night and Gandhi's thoughts during it begins his Satyagraha career. He states, quote, "I began to think of my duty. Should I fight for my rights or go back to India? Or should I go on to Pretoria without minding the insults and return to India after finishing the case? It would be cowardice to run back to India without fulfilling my obligation. The hardship to which I had been subjected was superficial, only a symptom of the deep disease of color prejudice. I should try, if possible, to root out the disease and suffer hardships in the process. Redress for wrongs I should seek only to the extent that would be necessary for the removal of color prejudice." End quote. Certainly this moment in Gandhi's autobiography is important, and a number of scholars view it as akin to a dark night of the soul, that being an intense period following some sort of rejection or intense period of loneliness that leads to a clearer understanding of the nature of the self and the world. I do not want to diminish the importance of this moment. It is important. Note the language Gandhi uses. He talks about duty, obligation, the superficial nature of physical hardship, the clear sense of a systematic or structural injustice, and the idea that combating such injustice entails hardships. All, I would suggest, central elements of what will become Satyagraha. What I do want to suggest, however, is that Gandhi presents the events on the train and his thoughts in the waiting room of the train station as something of a personal revelation, an explanation of the moment which led to Satyagraha as opposed to his first foray into resistance. I would suggest that the next chapter in the autobiography, More Hardships, is actually designed to demonstrate Satyagraha to the reader. At this stage of the journey, Gandhi has to take a stagecoach. He is forced to sit on the outside of the coach box with the driver until they stop at Pardekov, at which point we are told the following, quote, "Now the leader desired to sit where I was seated, as he wanted to smoke or possibly have some fresh air. So he took a piece of dirty sackcloth from the driver, spread it on the footboard, and said, addressing me, 'Sami, you sit on this. I want to sit near the driver.' The insult was more than I could bear. In fear and trembling I said to him, 'It was you who seated me here, though I should have been accommodated inside. Now you would have me sit at your feet. I will not do so, but I am prepared to sit inside.' As I was struggling through these sentences, the man came down upon me and began heavily to box my ears. He seized me by the arm and tried to drag me down. I clung to the brass rails of the coach box and was determined to keep my hold even at the risk of breaking my wrist bones." End quote. Thus far, the account of the train compartment and the stagecoach sound remarkably similar. But the next moments differentiate them. Gandhi states, quote, "The passengers were witnessing the scene, the man swearing at me, dragging and belaboring me, and I remaining still. He was strong and I was weak. Some of the passengers were moved to pity and exclaimed, 'Man, let him alone. Don't beat him. He is not to blame.' 'No fear,' cried the man, but he seemed somewhat chestfallen and stopped beating me." End quote. The stagecoach leaves, at which point the leader points to Gandhi and says, quote, "Take care. Let me once we get to Standerton. I will show you what I do." End quote. When they arrive at Standerton, however, Gandhi is greeted by a group of Indians who, quote, "gathered around me. I told them all that I had gone through. They were very sorry to hear it and comforted me by relating to me their own bitter experiences." End quote. Essential, I would suggest, to Gandhi's account of the stagecoach incident is the role of the witnesses on the stagecoach and the role played by the group of Indians who meet Gandhi after his ride. Central to Gandhi's success on the stagecoach is the role of the passengers as active witnesses to injustice. Central to Gandhi's ability to escape continued violence from the stagecoach leader is the presence of a group, I would suggest a group of witnesses who are also active. Also central to the first emergence of Gandhi's South African campaigns is the sharing of his account with others and the sharing of their stories with him. If we view the stagecoach incident as the basis of Gandhi's future Satyagraha campaigns, we need to grasp that Gandhi's perception of the media is as a group of active witnesses, not necessarily the common understanding of media as newspaper reporters. This group of active witnesses who do not only report on the events they see, but actively use their reports to impact the scenes of injustice to which they are a witness. The implication is also that the understanding of the media is a very broad category here. Any witness to injustice who does not respond to that injustice in the most minimal of ways, here the reporting of that event to others, the dissemination of the injustice to a broader audience, participates in the structure of injustice and violence to which they witness. In other words, to stand back passively is not an option for Gandhi. Hopefully the key difference between the train carriage incident and the stagecoach incident are now clear. It is not so much that the actions of Gandhi that tip the scales one way or another. His actions are consistent throughout. Rather, it is the response of the onlookers that constructs a dramatic difference between the two accounts. I perceive Gandhi's later involvement with the print media to be informed by this incident. They become an active witness that allows for the success of his campaigns. The end of the narrative is also significant. If Gandhi chooses to hide the events of his trip from his friends, or to dismiss the event in a desire to let the event pass, the issue closes in a meaningless manner. So we can argue that the second role of the witness, here, Gandhi, is to spread the story of injustice to others. Perhaps a more traditional understanding of the role of the media. This spreading of the tale becomes an act of communal bonding and self-understanding. The people who listen to Gandhi's story have empathy with it because they have experienced similar episodes of injustice. Hence, the report of the incident can take on a life of its own, well beyond the actual events themselves. Telling, in effect, and spreading the story has a significant power in and of itself. The implications for this line of reasoning about media as both a spreader of the story and as an active witness to events for contemporary society are varied, but let me suggest one important implication for us. The role of the media in the lead-up and the initial phases of the Iraq War have now been relatively well documented and scrutinized by academics and certain sections of the media. The leading criticism of the media during this period was that they had lost, or quite suspended, their ability to critically evaluate the reports they received from American military and governmental sources. The media, in this case, were certainly active, but they were also a poor and unreliable witness to the events as they unfolded. One rather scathing attack on the media during this period describes them as active cheerleaders of U.S. doctrine, ignoring evidence which countered what they were being officially told by government sources, and essentially reporting what the government asked them to do, without much thought to the consequences of inaccurate reporting or inaccurate interpretation. Even some of the best reporters in America fell victim to this type of uncritical dissemination of information. Jim Lehrer, a reporter for NPR, and a media figure I very much respect. I picked on Jim Lehrer because I really do like the News Hour on NPR. I think it's one of the best news programs out there. I picked someone who I thought does a remarkable job of news reporting. It's very easy to find people who report the news poorly. So I wanted to sort of demonstrate the spread of this. He also presented the news during this period as it was given to him largely by government and military sources. Later on, Lehrer defended his actions by claiming that he does not see his job as a reporter to interfere with the news. He is there to report what is told to him, not to interfere. What Lehrer fails to acknowledge, however, is that an active level of making a choice, as news stories only present and that is an interpretation. In other words, I think Gandhi would argue that there is no such thing as a passive media presence. The very choice of deciding which reports end up in media is an active choice on the part of media participants, and the act itself shapes an interpretation of the news. Gandhi does not suggest that the media can do anything other than be active. There is no passive news reporting in Gandhi's vision. Blair could have followed, for instance, the reports of Charles Sennett, from the Boston Globe, who deliberately chose not to be embedded with the US troops in Iraq. His news reports, which only first appeared on NPR in November of 2003, some 18 months after his first reports from Iraq appeared, paint a stark picture of a gap between what he was told by US officials of the success of the stabilization of Iraq and what he saw on the streets of Baghdad and in the homes of Iraqis with whom he stayed. The details of this failure in Iraq only recently crept into mainstream US media last summer after Hurricane Katrina, when major media outlets in the US came face to face with the type of gap Sennett describes in Iraq. What we can take from this material is that the media, as Gandhi assumes, is an active force. The question for us in the contemporary age is whether we act as a tool for justice or injustice, and what we do as individuals to the local and world events to move the story we see around us to justice. Thank you.
You underestimate your